Chapter 25, Red Sea Gospel. In the previous chapter, we placed the story of the crossing of the Red Sea in the context of Pharaoh trapping Israel, only to find himself caught in his own trap and perishing. While this explains many things, it does not provide the full context for why God told Moses to raise his hand and command the waters that were divided to come together, causing the death of Pharaoh and his host. This thought is emphasized in this verse, showing that God brought the sea upon the Egyptians and covered them. And when they cried unto the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and brought Hiphil, the sea, upon them, and covered them. And your eyes have seen what I have done in Egypt, and ye dwelt in the wilderness a long season. Joshua 24:7. In order to understand this part of the story, we must introduce the true cross of Christ. We must look down upon the Egyptians through the pillar of fire to see what troubled the Egyptians and caused their demise. Exodus 14:24. Christ was the one in the pillar of fire, and God was looking down upon the Egyptians through him. Then the angel of God, who had been leading the people of Israel, moved to the rear of the camp. The pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them. Exodus 14:19. Paul connects this angel of God with Christ. He is the one who led the children of Israel. I don't want you to forget, dear brothers and sisters, about our ancestors in the wilderness long ago. All of them were guided by a cloud that moved ahead of them, and all of them walked through the sea on dry ground. In the cloud and in the sea, all of them were baptized as followers of Moses. All of them ate the same spiritual food, and all of them drank the same spiritual water, for they drank from the spiritual rock that traveled with them, and that rock was Christ. 1 Corinthians 10:1-4. Christ is only connected to the term angel with respect to being a messenger from God. In the book of Daniel, he is called Michael, the archangel, and Gabriel called Michael the prince of Daniel's people. See Daniel 10:13-21. Now we need to step deeper into this story in light of our ninth tool, which speaks to the true cross of Christ. This material is certainly meat, not milk, so it will take some effort to chew and digest it. The Apostle Paul tells us that the gospel of Christ is the power of God unto salvation. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. Romans 1:16. The gospel, or good news of Christ, is the power of God. Paul defines the power of God a few verses down, where he says, "For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Romans 1:20. It is for this reason that the Apostle John connects the preaching of the gospel to the worship of the Creator God. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water." Revelation 14:6-7. It requires the creative power of God to save a person, the same power that spoke the world into existence can regenerate the human heart to make it like Christ. In his book, The Everlasting Covenant, pastor and medical doctor E.J. Waggoner makes this insightful observation, quote, "That is to say, ever since the creation of the world, men have been able to see the eternal power of God if they would use their senses. For it is clearly to be discerned in the things which he has made. Creation shows the power of God. So the power of God is creative power. And since the gospel is the power of God unto salvation, it follows that the gospel is the manifestation of creative power to save men from sin. But we have also learned that the gospel is the good news of salvation through Christ. The gospel consists in the preaching of Christ and him crucified. The apostle says, "For Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God." 1 Corinthians 1:17-18. And still further, we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jews a stumbling block, and unto the Greeks foolishness. But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. 1 Corinthians 1:23-24. This is why the apostle did as he says, "And I, brethren, when I came to you, came not with excellency of speech or of wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and him crucified." 1 Corinthians 2:1-2. The preaching of Christ and him crucified is the preaching of the power of God, and therefore it is the preaching of the gospel. For the gospel is the power of God. And this is exactly in harmony with the thought that the preaching of the gospel is the setting forth of God as the Creator. For the power of God is creative power, and Christ is the one through whom all things were created. No one can preach Christ without preaching him as the Creator. All are to honor the Son even as they honor the Father. Whatever preaching fails to make prominent the fact that Jesus Christ is the Creator of all things is not the preaching of the gospel. End quote. E.J. Wagner, The Everlasting Covenant, page 22. In the work of God saving the Israelites, it is evident that the creative power of God was at work. As we look closely at the Red Sea crossing, we see elements of the creation week manifesting. Let us consider 3 points in the Red Sea crossing that have relevance to the creation story. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Exodus 14:19-22. On day 1 of creation, light appeared, and God separated the light from the darkness. We see that when the cloud pillar came between the Israelites and Egyptians, that the light was separated from the darkness. On day 2 of creation, God divided the waters above from the waters beneath. Then on the 3rd day, the waters beneath were gathered together, and the dry land appeared. The exact same word used for the dry ground in the creation story is used for the dry land the Israelites crossed over. In the book Divine Risk, we explain in detail the creation story and its significance to the gospel. Divine Risk is available at fatheroflove.info for download. Before God said, "Let there be light," there was darkness over the face of the earth, and it was covered with water. Satan had come to this earth to prevent the work of Christ in the creation of this world and frustrate God's purposes in his Son. In the story of the Red Sea, Satan would frustrate the purposes of God by preventing the escape of Israel because of the sea barrier. Christ is the light of the world, and in the revelation of him in heaven, there was a separation between light and darkness. This separation was expanded when the waters were separated. The waters above represent the loyal angels who trusted God's revelation of his Son, while the waters below represent Satan and his angels that turned away from the light. The waters below God called seas. In the waters below, God created great whales. The word for whale in this chapter is the same word used for the serpent that came from the rod of Moses. And it is also the same word used in Psalm 74:13 for the dragons who had their heads broken when God divided the Red Sea, which we mentioned earlier. As God's people passed down the gorge to the mouth of the sea, which was the mouth of the serpent dragon in the waters, we have an illustration echoing back to when the Son of God spoke the world into existence. The serpent of old, the devil, placed himself to prevent Christ from doing his work of creation. He was ready to devour the seed born as soon as it should be created. For God, who said, "Let there be light in the darkness," has made this light shine in our hearts so we could know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 4:6. The revelation of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, caused Satan and his host to retreat, both in the creation story and the crossing of the Red Sea. The imagery of Beelzephon, the monster, speaks to us of Satan's domain, which the Israelites are entering into by the power of God. The angels of light hold back the forces of darkness to enable God's people to pass through. We read of a strong east wind that blew the waters apart and caused them to separate. In the creation story, the Spirit of God, which is sometimes represented by wind, hovered over the dark waters, and on day 2, the firmament was filled with air between the waters, called a firmament. If there was no firmament, life could not exist. Without the separation of the waters, there would be no dry land for us to live on as we sojourn through this world. All of this is vital to understand because of what we read next. Then the Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and charioteers, chased them into the middle of the sea. But just before dawn, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud, and he threw their forces into total confusion. He twisted their chariot wheels, making their chariots difficult to drive. "Let's get out of here, away from these Israelites," the Egyptians shouted. "The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Exodus 14:23-25. Just before sunrise, the presence of God, looking down upon them through the pillar of fire and cloud, caused the host of Pharaoh to tremble. The one who was in the pillar of fire and the cloud was Christ. The sun is a symbol of Christ, the light of the world. When the Egyptians were covered in darkness and could see the barrier between them and the Israelites, they had enough warning to know that it was not wise to try and chase the Israelites. But after the hardening of Pharaoh's heart through the plagues, Pharaoh had ceased to hear the pricks of conscience. And as soon as the cloud started to move, they continued their determined effort to capture the Israelites. This is all taking place as the sun begins to dawn, which is reminiscent of the fourth day of creation and the rising of Christ, the Son of righteousness. But for you who fear my name, the Son of righteousness will rise with healing in his wings, and you will go free, leaping with joy like calves let out to pasture. Malachi 4:2. In the story of the Red Sea, we have seen 4 connecting points to the creation week. But the whole creation week is revealed in this story. I'm now going to read from a table with 2 columns. The column on the left is titled Creation Week, while the column on the right is titled Red Sea Crossing. I'll be reading from left to right. The left column, Creation Week. Number 1, separate light from darkness. Genesis 1:1-5. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 1, Egyptians separated from Israelites by pillar of cloud. Light to the Israelites and darkness to the Egyptians. Exodus 14:20. The left column, Creation Week. Number 2, waters divided. Genesis 1:6-8. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 2, waters of the Red Sea divided. Exodus 14:21. The left column, Creation Week. Number 3, dry ground, H 3004, appeared which was gathered into one place called earth, waters gathered together also as seas. Genesis 1:9-13. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 3, dry ground, H 3004, appears and waters went back. Exodus 14:22. The left column, Creation Week. Number 4, sun and moon created. Genesis 1:14-19. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 4, sun dawns. Exodus 14:27. The left column, Creation Week. Number 5, great creatures. H 8577 in the sea. Genesis 1:21. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 5, Pharaoh the dragon. H 8577 is in the sea. Ezekiel 29:3. The left column, Creation Week. Number 6, man is created in freedom. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 6, Israelites were saved and came forth a new free nation. Exodus 14:30 and 15:16. The people you purchased. H 7069, created. The left column, Creation Week. Number 7, the power of God manifested. Romans 1:20. The right column, Red Sea Crossing. Number 7, the power of God manifested. Exodus 14:31. Paul grasped the reality of the gospel manifested in creation when he adapted the words of Psalm 19 to the preaching of the gospel. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the Son. Psalm 19, 1-4. So faith comes from hearing, that is, hearing the good news about Christ. But I ask, have the people of Israel actually heard the message? Yes, they have. The message has gone throughout the earth, and the words to all the world. Romans 10, 17-18. This reveals that the redemptive power of God in Christ is manifested in the creation story. The redemption of the Israelites at the Red Sea is stamped with the creation story. They were recreated. That's why Paul sees they were baptized, 1 Corinthians 10:2, meaning they were born again. The same redemptive, creative power is manifested in the story of Noah, when the divided waters came together from above and beneath, and Noah was saved in the ark with his family. The entire salvation of the human race is expressed in the creation story and might be summarized as follows. I now have a table with 3 columns. The left column is titled Event. The middle column is titled Texts. And the right column is titled Representation. I will be reading from left to right. The left column, titled Event. Number 1, Light from Darkness. Texts, Genesis 1, 1-5. The right column, Representation. War in Heaven, Revelation 12, 7-9. Satan spread darkness about God's character. Light shining in the face of Christ, 2 Corinthians 4:6. Enoch, whose preaching of righteousness is the light in first period of 1,000 years, culminated in his being taken to heaven. Genesis 5:21-24. The left column, titled Event. Number 2, Separation of the waters. Texts, Genesis 1, 6-8. The right column, Representation. Gospel light causes darkness to turn. Separation of Satan and his angels from God. Jude 1:6. Light and darkness now battle for the minds of the universe. 1 John 1:5. Noah, the preacher of righteousness in the second period of 1,000 years, endures the coming together of the waters above and beneath. Through the grace of God in the everlasting covenant, the waters once again are separated. Genesis 9, 9-17. The left column, titled Event. Number 3, Waters gathered together and dry land appears. Texts, Genesis 1, 9-13. The right column, Representation. The sower goes forth to sow the gospel seed. Matthew 13:3. Gospel gives solid ground for the feet and brings us out of the horrible pit. Genesis 1:2, Psalm 40, 1-2. God restricts Satan's activities and puts bounds on the waters. Job 26:10. The distinction between the kingdoms of light and darkness are revealed in the lives of Nimrod and Abraham and their descendants through the third period of 1,000 years. The left column, titled Event, number 4, Two Great Lights and the Stars. Texts, Genesis 1:14-19. The right column, Representation. Gospel seed manifests in the sky, corresponds to day 1. The heavens declare the glory or character of God. Psalm 19:1. The framework for the woman of Revelation 12 is ratified. Revelation 12:1. These lights are given for the appointments of God and the stream of life from his throne. Ezekiel 46 and 47. Christ, the Son of Righteousness, appears at end of fourth period of 1,000 years. The left column, titled Event, Fish and Birds. Texts, Genesis 1:20-23. The right column, Representation. Gospel manifests in the sea and air, corresponds to day 2, Job 12:7-8. The fowls of the air were designed to reveal the character of God. The connection to day 2 also reveals the separation between the church in the wilderness and the Church of Rome in the fifth period of 1,000 years. Revelation 12:6. Two different gospels are presented. One becomes the cage of every hateful bird. Revelation 18:2. And the other remains as Christ's fishers of men. Matthew 4:19. The left column, titled Event, number 6, Animals and Man. Texts, Genesis 1:24-31. Right column, Representation. Man is made in the image of God and created to reveal his character. The animals also were to reveal the light of God's character. When man comes to completion in the second Adam, then we are prepared for rest. Genesis 1:26, Job 12:7, 1 Corinthians 15:22. The 144,000 who manifest at the end of the sixth period of 1,000 years will reveal the glory of God. Revelation 14:1-5. The left column, titled Event, number 7, Sabbath Rest. Texts, Genesis 2:1-3. Right column, Representation. The great controversy ends, and we enter into rest when the darkness is dispelled and there is no more night. The saints are 1,000 years in heaven. Revelation 21:23-25. The pivotal point in this table is that Christ was revealed at the end of the fourth period of human history. He is the light of the world, the Sun of righteousness. The greatest revelation of light came into the world at this time. It is also the time when Christ was crucified. God mentioned two signs that would cause the people to believe Moses. The first sign was turning the rod into a serpent. The second sign was to put his hand in his bosom and pull it out as leprosy. Moses showed both these signs to the Israelites in Egypt, but to Pharaoh he only showed the rod turning to a serpent. Did Pharaoh experience the second sign? Why withdrawest thou thy hand, even thy right hand? Pluck it out of thy bosom. For God is my King of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Psalm 74, 11-13. Christ is the one who dwells in the bosom of the Father. John 1:18. Christ is the power of God. 1 Corinthians 1:24. As Pharaoh and his army were drowning in terror, Christ was with them, suffering with them. Psalm 18 speaks of Christ on the cross, and we see that this language is similar to what Pharaoh experienced at the Red Sea. The ropes of death entangled me. Floods of destruction swept over me. The grave wrapped its ropes around me. Death laid a trap in my path. Psalm 18, 4-5. At the brightness that was before him, his thick clouds passed, hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. Yea, he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he shot out lightnings and discomfited them. Then the channels of waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils. Psalm 18, 12-15. Leprosy is a symbol of sin. Leviticus 13. And on the cross, Christ is made sin for us. 2 Corinthians 5:21. In pulling the leprous hand out of the bosom, we see Christ crucified in the death of the Egyptians. But in our human state, we consider them smitten of God and afflicted. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Isaiah 53:4. The tool of the present cross reveals to us the sufferings of Christ in the Red Sea experience. But God had to give up the Egyptians as a ransom to save the Israelites, because this is the only way that both the Egyptians and the Israelites could reconcile the evil done in Egypt. Now we come to the crux of all we have been explaining. We recall in chapter 6 how humanity understands the phrase, my God, why have you forsaken me?" We imagine that God forsakes his Son because his justice demands the death of Christ for our salvation. Exactly the same thing is occurring in the story of the Red Sea crossing. Our sense of justice causes us to see the raising of the rod and the coming together of the water as God's vindictive justice, destroying the Egyptian people for their sins against Israel. Our sense of justice causes us to see God without his fatherly qualities. The darkness that covered the earth, the thunder and lightning manifested at the cross, are understood as God's anger towards sin. But in Psalm 18, Christ was uttering the words of a broken-hearted father whose son was just murdered by the human race. God appears to be the destroyer of Pharaoh, even as he appears to be the destroyer of Christ on the cross. In both cases, Christ was crucified. In both cases, redemption takes place for the people of God. When Jesus died on earth, both the innocent and the guilty were hung on crosses. The human heart requires the death of the innocent and the guilty for his sense of justice to be satisfied. See the book Atonement, chapter 9, for more details on this, available for download at fatheroflove.info. This is based on carnal ideas of what we think God wants and is inspired by Satan. I have covered this subject in greater detail in the book Atonement, available at fatheroflove.info. The death of the relatively innocent son of Pharaoh and all the firstborn of Egypt became the key to allow the Israelites to leave Egypt. But it was not until the death of the guilty Pharaoh at the Red Sea that Israel experienced full redemption. There is one more piece of evidence we need to consider with the Red Sea crossing, and it relates to the final destruction of Satan. We briefly spoke about this in the previous chapter. Satan is said to be slain as one in the midst of the sea, Ezekiel 28:8. Let us consider carefully verse 7 of this chapter. "I will now bring, permit, against you a foreign army, the terror of the nations. They will draw their swords against your marvelous wisdom and defile your splendor." Ezekiel 28:7. God tells us that Satan will be assailed by an army that is the terror of the nations. The word in Hebrew for terror means tyrannical, violent, oppressor. Those who Satan has ruled through the ages reflect his character. And when they realize they are lost, they turn on Satan and seek to devour him. The chapter in Ezekiel continues. "Will you then boast, 'I am a God,' to those who kill you? To them you will be no God, but merely a man. You will die like an outcast at the hands of foreigners." H. 21:14. "I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken." Ezekiel 28:9-10. God indicates that foreigners will kill Satan. These are people foreign to God because they do not know him. What is most interesting about the word for foreigners is that it is the exact same word that describes God's strange act. The Lord will come as he did against the Philistines at Mount Perazim and against the Amorites at Gibeon. He will come to do a strange H21:14 thing. He will come to do an unusual deed. Isaiah 28:21. God's strange act is to turn aside and allow consequences to play out. In the end, God will turn aside and let the evil seeds Satan has planted in the nations rise up and destroy him. But just like the story of the Red Sea, it will appear that God destroyed Satan. The waters of the Red Sea represent people and nations. Then the angel said to me, "The waters where the prostitute is ruling represent masses of people of every nation and language." Revelation 17:15. These waters were stirred up by Satan through his violent, tyrannical nature. Leviathan, who also represents Satan, reveals this characteristic. Leviathan makes the water boil with its commotion. It stirs the depths like a pot of ointment. The water glistens in its wake, making the sea look white. Job 41:31-32. The rage that Satan inspired in men will come back upon him. He will be drowned in the harvest of the seeds of violence he planted in men. God is not mocked. As Satan sowed, so shall he reap. But even in this process, Christ is crucified. He created Lucifer and loves him. It is torture to see him come to his end. Every breath of Satan comes from Christ, and therefore Christ suffers with him to the end. But humanity considers Christ smitten of God, not smitten of man. Is it not time to come forth out of the blindness of our surface level reading of the Bible? Will we remain content with a surface level reading of the Scriptures? This story of the Red Sea is so rich in meaning. There are other things we haven't touched yet. There is a connection between Baal-zephon, Lord of the North, and the King of the North, who pitches his palace between the glorious mountain and the sea in Daniel 11:45. But we won't stop to explore this now. It is just one example of how rich the Word of God is and how much more can be explored here. We shall be studying these things forever, and they will not be exhausted. As I have prayed about this story and asked my Father in heaven to explain it to me, the things I have shared with you are what was given to me. How much richer and more beautiful is this story in this light. Truly, God's thoughts are not our thoughts. Neither are our ways His ways. Will you believe the Red Sea gospel? Or will you remain in the gloom of seeing God as the warrior God drowning his enemies? As you judge, you will be judged. Let us summarize this story in relation to our 10 tools. I now have a table with 2 columns. The column on the left is titled Tools, and the column on the right is titled Application. I will be reading from left to right. Tool number 1, Family. Application. The Egyptians are God's children also, though they know him less than the Israelites. We can't view them simply as enemies of God. They made themselves into the enemies of God, but God loved them the same as the Israelites. He is not a respecter of persons. Tool number 2, Gospel Character. Application. Jesus never drowned anyone while here on earth. The Jewish leaders made themselves his enemy, so their house was left to them desolate. He did not kill them, but rather allowed them to kill him. Tool number 3, Enmity. Application. Moses stated that they would not see the Egyptians again forever. Exodus 14:13. God didn't say this. He only said he would be honored through Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardened his heart to such an extent that he did not see the warning signs in the pillar of cloud turning light and dark, nor the warning to turn around when they became stuck. Tool number 4, 2 mirrors. Application. The command of God to Moses to raise his hand so that the waters will come together appears to be God killing the Egyptians in the Old Covenant mirror. In the New Covenant, Pharaoh came into a path of redemption without faith, and the angels could not hold the waters back. The waters symbolize the nations who will finally destroy Satan through the fury he planted in them. Tool number 5, Angel Hedge. Application. Angels protected the Israelites through the Red Sea, but stopped protecting when the Egyptians came through. Tool number 6, Earth Curse. Application. Pharaoh's lack of faith made it impossible for the waters to remain divided. Like in the days of Noah, the waters came together because of their wickedness. Tool number 7, Projection. Application. When we read the Bible, we think that God is just like us. And as Pharaoh was a cruel tyrant, we naturally think he deserves to die. We imagine that Pharaoh is smitten of God and afflicted. But in reality, Christ suffered the agonies of crucifixion in the death of Pharaoh and the Egyptian soldiers. Tool number 8, 2 covenants. Application. The death of Pharaoh and the soldiers magnified the Israelite belief that God was a God of war. This sinful trait was caused to abound in the Red Sea story. It also abounds for all who believe God personally drowned the Egyptians. Tool number 9, true cross. Application. Christ was crucified in the Red Sea in the loss of the Egyptians. They were given as a ransom to save Israel. The innocent firstborn son of Pharaoh was slain in Egypt, and the guilty Pharaoh was slain in the Red Sea, thus completing the atonement process for Israel. Likewise, Christ was first killed to open our minds, but the atonement will be completed for us when the wicked with Satan are destroyed. Tool number 10, God's judgment. Application. Pharaoh thought he had trapped the Israelites, but this trap destroyed Pharaoh himself. God judged Pharaoh by allowing him to receive the consequences of his choices. If God had lured the Egyptians into the water, then we could say that God killed them. But he tried to prevent them from entering the water and pulled off their chariot wheels to slow them down. Psalm 9:16.